Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing Lanzerath Ridge, a Valiant Defense game designed by David Thompson and published by Danverson Games. Alright, so here's Lanzerath Ridge. It's all set up, and this is a solo-only game. It's in fact the fourth entry in the Valiant Defense series by David Thompson. So the first one published in this series was Pavlov's House. The second published but first designed was Castle Itter, followed by Soldiers in Postmen's Uniforms, and now we have Lanzerath Ridge. And this particular game is about the Battle of Lanzerath Ridge, which occurred on the first day of the Battle of the Bulge, and basically very few, very brave Americans held up the German army for a long time, and most of them even survived. It's a really impressive historical story that you can now experience as a game. Basically, the way the game works is that your defenders are up here, and this is the most resources we're ever going to have. This is the best off we're ever going to be. Meanwhile, these Germans are going to approach turn by turn until we've worked through this entire deck. It is divided into 4 rounds, so you only have to get through attacker deck 1 before you get a little bit of a reset in advance of attacker deck 2. But things are going to get a lot tougher and more desperate the more you continue with the game. It is, of course, a Valiant Defense game, so that's kind of the thematic point, but it's really fun and very stressful at the same time. So basically on any given turn, the Germans are going to resolve 3 attack cards against you, and they're going to put more units out on the map, and they're going to slowly approach you. They're going to be able to put machine guns out that can shoot you and that can disrupt and even kill your defenders. And then things just keep getting gnarlier and gnarlier towards the end of the game. So the way for you to win is to survive all 4 rounds of this onslaught. There are 2 ways to lose. One is for any turn of yours to end with a German in a space that is a defender space. So if they make it all the way up to the fence, all the way up to your grenades, and all the way up to here where your guys are stationed, unfortunately that means that the Germans have won and you are going to lose. The other way to lose is to run out of morale, and so you end up dropping in morale whenever your soldiers are disrupted or when you have a casualty. So you need to be watching your team's morale as you go and try to handle a disruption as quickly and efficiently as possible so that you don't just drop a whole bunch at the end of a turn. As the Germans approach, they're going to be held up a little bit. There are a couple little fences here that cause them to pile up unless there is a leader on the line. So you have a little bit of time at the beginning. And then the first soldiers to cross into this area will hit a grenade, which is pretty cool, but there's only 1 grenade and you never get it back per track. So they offer a reprieve, but it's very temporary. On your side of things, you're going to spend your turn taking up to 5 different actions, and they're going to be split between major and minor actions. So minor actions like moving or just making a call on the radio, those are not going to exhaust your units. They take up an action, and nobody can take more than 1 action per turn, but they don't actually exhaust the defender who is performing them. On the other hand, major actions, and those can include attacking, which you're going to absolutely need to do to keep the Germans back, are considered major actions, and you actually have to flip your unit who performs it over to their exhausted side until somebody with the command power can come over and unexhaust them. So you're going to have to be careful about who's taking actions and who is exhausted so that you constantly have something to do that's going to give you a productive turn. The other thing that's interesting is that in addition to just having some ability to shoot, so there are little die values on each of your defenders, you're also going to have access to some fancy weapons. So we've got some really nice guns around here, some of which can be mounted on trucks, and these weapons are awesome. You get to do machine gun fire, you can fire a whole bunch of rounds that are very powerful all in one go, but you also have to be careful because depending on how many rounds you choose to fire, you may have to roll to see if the weapon has overheated, and if it has, it's done for the game. It's also possible for the Germans to damage your vehicles, which will impact your ability to get a lot out of those as well. And that's really going to matter because when you go to the radio station or to this artillery vehicle, you can add tokens to those areas as a minor action that you can then discard as a major action to do things like remove cards from the deck and bump up your intelligence level, which will be points at the end of the game. So there's a lot of drama here. This is a game that is very tense, where things can turn very quickly, where one really rough attack round can really throw you for a loop. But it's also a game where you're trying to make the most out of your actions and strategize as well as you possibly can in order to stretch out what little you have for as long and as effectively as possible. If you want to see some more detailed rules and examples of gameplay, I actually did do a Kickstarter preview of this game that fortunately still applies, because when David Thompson sends his games off to be Kickstarted, they're basically already done. So we were waiting for more art, and this is the beautiful final edition of the game, but the rules actually still stand, I'm happy to say. So if you want to see more, I'll link that other video in the show notes. But for now, let's get to some final thoughts. All right, so now for some final thoughts. I do want to preface this with the fact that David Thompson is a close personal friend of mine, and we are designing a game together, so I like his stuff. That's the bias. But I really do like Lanzerath Ridge. How much do I like it? I guess that's the subject of these final thoughts. So, okay, I have a deep emotional attachment to Pavlov's House. It's my favorite Valiant Defense game, with Castle Itter coming up in a close second. And Soldiers in Postmen's Uniforms is a game that I consider good, but I just don't have the same attachment to it as the others. So Lanzerath Ridge is coming into that mix. It's the fourth Valiant Defense game, and it's clearly a Valiant Defense game, but it was also getting to the point where David was going to need to freshen up the system in order to keep this interesting. And I think that Lanzerath Ridge does do that. I actually really liked the kind of spread on the map this time. So something like Soldiers in Postmen's Uniforms takes place in a single house, and it can get really claustrophobic. Lanzerath Ridge is stressful, but there are multiple lanes, so soldier movement is a really big deal in this game in a way that it kind of didn't feel as big of a deal from a single building or from a single castle in Castle Itter. So this one's interesting because you're dealing with a different landscape than previous Valiant Defense games have provided, and I thought that that gave my defenders movement and my choices about actions and where to put guns in a different light. I also like that there were some kind of interesting actions that didn't seem to pay off at the beginning, but could pay off later if you invested enough in them. And those would be intelligence, which I frankly didn't focus on as much because I am just trying to live. I'm not really good enough at any of these games to worry about getting all the points. But there's also the artillery radio calls, which, start as just little minor actions that add tokens to your artillery vehicle. But then, you can take a major action to roll some dice, and if you roll well, you can remove cards from the attacker stack. So sometimes you put a whole bunch of effort into those little actions and they don't pay off because you roll badly. But other times it's like a massive game swinging success. And so getting to kind of choose whether to sink resources into things that are essentially a gamble, I really enjoyed. I thought it was super interesting, and it gave me something to kind of think about extra as I was playing. I also liked the setup of, soldiers approaching the fences and then the little grenades that pop off. It really felt like, ooh, they're getting closer. Oh no, the grenade is breached. Now everything gets more serious. That feeling of mounting tension throughout the game was really good. I think in Lanzerath Ridge, once you get pretty good at it, you're generally going to make it to late third or fourth assault. And then it's a matter of how much can you pull out by the skin of your teeth. And I like that as well. I mean, the game is still hard, but you get to experience the full story arc pretty successfully, and I think that that's important. I will say that aesthetically, because the art for this one is different, it is absolutely beautiful. Niels Johansson did an amazing job with the board for this game and with the card art. And while I like all the Valiant Defense games and, enjoy their more war-gamey look of yesteryear, I will say that the very aesthetically pleasing board does enhance the experience, and it made me feel like I was on a snowy ridge in December trying to keep the Nazis at bay, and it was really satisfying. I also like some of the changes that David made to things like line of sight. This is a game where you can kind of take long shots and see what happens. And, when you've got machine guns and you maybe want to take a risk, sometimes they pay off and then sometimes they really don't. And, how much of a gambler are you? And it kind of depends. So, the game gives you everything that you need to create a really massive narrative where you can really go for broke and maybe have something amazing happen or have it fail catastrophically. You can play a little more conservatively, but you're still going to feel that tight march of your enemy coming closer, getting, in your space, and then you have to deal with it. And, you know, stage by stage, and if you read the companion guide, you can see this, the assaults from the Germans really mirror what actually happened in the battle. And so you get slightly different challenges in each assault deck based on the increasing intensity and different sort of points of attack that the Germans were choosing during the Battle of Lanzerath Ridge. So you also get to really learn about the battle in that respect, and I thought that was really cool. So if you already like the Valiant Defense games, you will like this one. I think it's actually, I can't decide if I like it better than Pavlov's House or not. It's definitely my first or my second favorite in the series at this point. I just really like it. And that's not a knock on Castle Itter, which is also beloved, obviously. But I think that this one represents kind of like a new flavor within the Valiant Defense series, or hints at a direction where it will go to stay interesting and to stay fresh. So I love the operational aspects of Pavlov's House. I think that over time, I might ultimately prefer Lanzerath Ridge, but I'm not ready to commit to that yet. But it's really, really good. It's a very good entry within the Valiant Defense series. It may be the best one yet. And I think that if you already like these games, then you'll still like Lanzerath because it's got some different variations on the theme. And if you've never played a Valiant Defense game before, I actually think that Lanzerath is a great one to start with because it is very accessible, but also very tense. It really captures the feeling of Valiant Defense, but it's also David Thompson having fully come into his own within the series. And I think that that makes it a wonderful place to come in if you've never played a Valiant Defense game before. So I'm happy to say today, on the anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, which is when I'm running this review, that this game really lives up to its promise of being a tense but fun game that really shows you one aspect of a battle in all of its tension and all of its dwindling resources, and you really are going to have to fight it out to stay alive until the end of the game, but struggling to do so is a great pleasure. So I really like this one. I recommend it. It's going to be a permanent fixture in my collection. And even among Valiant Defense games, I would say this one is a prince, if not the king. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, give to my Patreon if you're feeling extra generous. I'd really appreciate it. And most of all, happy gaming.